are recipes for you to follow up, but we're going to work without a recipe as I do it, in part because I just want you to get a sense of an approach to doing this, right? So we're going to make a couple of different, we're going to start with a sausage, it's called a Tuscan bean soup. It's a sausage and bean soup. So this is a repeat. This is a repeat from last year, but everybody loves it. It's a really delicious soup. And we're going to put that on first because it's going to simmer for a little while. And then we're going to do a pureed soup. We're going to do a broccoli soup, okay, a cream of broccoli soup. And so that you can see how easy purees. How many of you actually have blenders or the liquidizer things in your house at least? Okay, Catherine, no, you don't. Because Catherine, because a lot of students tend to have them for smoothies and stuff. So it's the kind of thing that if you can get your parents to throw, buy you a piece of equipment, a blender is a really good thing to do. So I want to show you how to do that and how easy that is. And then the last one is going to be an easy minestrone. So vegetables, pasta, we can decide what we want to put in and not put in, so you can see how flexible that is. I started with some onion. I will chop an onion for the next soup, but I thought we'd get ourselves started. Now, so I'll bring this. The temperature of this up, and then I should have already done that, in fact. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to make, these are just 4 links of, we'll use the whole thing. You could probably do this soup with just 2, so if you bought a package of sausage like that, and you don't have to use sausage, you can use chicken, you can use other things if you wanted, even ground beef. But probably 2 of these is going to be plenty, but we'll use all 4 because we're not going to leave it here in the kitchen, right? So, because whenever you're using meat, and don't forget you could use this as the basis of a stew instead of a soup. I'm just going to, here, let me use these because I'm going to cut them with these. You want to do the meat and the onions first, all right? So we could do this same soup and make it a fish soup, but what we would do is cook the vegetable base of it first, and we'd actually just add the fish at the end. Because if you had a fillet of fish and cut it into pieces, that's going to cook in like literally a minute once you put that into boiling water. So fish you would want to add at the end, but anything you're doing with meat, and I'll tell you how we can sort of adapt this, for instance, as well. So let me just grab, here, I'm just going to cut it into this while this finishes. Okay, so put the right one on anyway. That's going to take a couple of minutes. And what I do is I just use a pair of kitchen scissors. You could take the casings off. You could crumble it, but this is just easy into bite-sized pieces. And we're going to saute this at the bottom of the pan. And then we're just going to add the other stuff. So the other thing is to think about, we were talking about time. Catherine and I were talking about any of these soups. This will probably be the most time consuming, but it shouldn't take us more than about 15 minutes to put together. And so what you do is you don't have to prep everything in advance. I'm going to while this is sautéing, I'm going to then prep the carrots and the celery and stuff, so you're doing it all at the same time, and you just save time that way. And by having, we've got the kettle boiling, by having your water boiled, when it's time to float the vegetables, you're not waiting for that pot of water to come back to a boil. So let me see if that's enough. There's enough fat usually in the sausage. Oh, yes. That's the sound we want to hear. So that means so you always add oil first. You can use butter. You can even, if you don't want to use any fat at all, a little bit of fat is going to give it flavor. A little bit of olive oil is not going to. It's going to be good for you too. It's not a problem. Always let the pan heat up first, then add the oil, then add whatever you're putting in. So that's yeah, this is quite a lot of sausage for this, but we'll just make a lot of soup. And, go. I'm just gonna put that in there and I'll let it. And if your pot is ever getting too hot, always just add a drop of water. I have to kind of, I'm used to working on a gas stove, so it's always just a bit of an adjustment for me to do that. So we've got, in this case, we've got our onion ready to go, and then we will, so this is just, all you want to do is kind of brown the sausage a little bit. It sort of starts to cook and brown. And what that's going to do is, let me grab my gloves. Just show it to you. Because I added a little bit of water, it's gone a little, it's a little lighter, but that little bit of browning is going to give the soup actually quite a lot of flavor. So I'm just going to throw in the chopped, so now we're just going to start adding the vegetables. And I'll just bring that up again. So onions always go in at the beginning. So if we weren't using any meat for this, we would have started with the onions, all right? Onions, you really need to cook them a little bit by themselves. Again, with a little bit of oil, with a little bit of water, just till they're a bit translucent. So you always start with your onions. In this case, meat and onions, and then we'll just let that cook for a few minutes until the term is, of course, translucent, right? So that the onions start to get a little bit soft. So this soup, these are just the classic ingredients in it. The base of just about anything, and if you're cooking Italian food, almost everything starts with onions, celery, and carrots, and maybe a little garlic. And we're going to put garlic in this too. So these three vegetables, the onion, celery, and carrots, make the base of a great deal of so a stew, soups, even in fact like a good meat sauce, a ragu starts with meat, but they're usually chopped much finer. Okay, so because this is a soup, we don't have to be super fussy about that. The French call it mirepoix. There are actually terms for these three vegetables. But they're pretty economical vegetables. Thank you. They're very economical vegetables, and they go a long way. So what was that? 3 pieces of celery. It's more than enough for what we need. You still have the better, so you could throw that into a bit of tuna. You can make a tuna salad. You could just eat it raw. So we've got the sausage, the onions, the celery. So next we want our carrots.
My favorite question.
Yes.
Lots of vegetables that people put in the fridge, most of them don't really need to be in the fridge though, right?
Like carrot, no, they don't. And in fact, I left these, certainly root vegetables don't need to. So sweet potatoes, onions. Carrots, what you want to be careful about is that they're not too moist in the bag, like sealed in the bag. If they're a bit dry, and in a cool place, that's good. If it's too warm, they will sprout, they'll rot, right? Yeah. And so yeah, you're right. I left the broccoli. So greens do tend to need to be refrigerated. So, but root vegetables don't. There are a lot of things that you can leave out. Yeah. Please do ask any questions as we go. I've tried to keep the recipes to very basic kinds of, really, apart from a knife and a cutting board and a pot, you won't actually need, well, with pureed soup, we are going to need a blender for it. So we're just going to, and with the carrots, if If you want them a little chunkier, keep in mind the bigger you cut them, the longer it takes to cook, right? So just keep your fingers out of the way. Just never do that. Keeping them out like that, because you're almost certainly going to cut them. And even if you're careful like this, you'll still, I think for big cooking events, I never at the table without Band-Aids, I think, so it's even experienced cooks. So let's throw in another carrot, I think.
I have a question. If I have a food processor at home, I use it very rarely, but would that mean because I'd be cutting it smaller, it'd be cooking for less time?
You could do these, and you could chop everything in half if you want. And especially for your pureed soup, you could then puree it in the food. You can use a food processor instead of a blender. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, you just want to be careful not to. Oh, you don't have to overblend. Like that will create a fine puree much faster than a blender will. So you just need to be a little bit careful. But you could use like the onions, for instance. I was very tempted last night to just do about 4 onions in the food processor to avoid the tears and all the. And that's a great. So those you just rough chop them, chop them in quarters, throw them in with your blade, and then just. And you'll get a nice even chop, and then you can use either the slicer attachment or the chop to do it. So again, it's a question of the shape. Because this soup, all these pieces, we're going to see them. That's why I'm sort of cutting them like this, just for a bit of uniformity. You can see that the thick part of the carrot, I cut it in half, and then I cut it 3 times that way, just to. So if the pieces are uniform, they're going to cook in more or less the same amount of time, right? But it doesn't have to be fancy. So this is looking very pretty already, I think, right? So we got great color. And so what I'm going to do now is add some, I'm going to use, and all of you are welcome to take some of this home tonight. I use like dry stock. Because you're making your own soup, you're still going to have a fraction of the sodium that you would normally get if you used a canned soup or anything that you buy in the supermarket, right? So this will add a little bit of flavor. I buy this at the Asian supermarket. It's much better than all the, and you can taste, at some point you can taste it if you want. It doesn't have that horrible aftertaste that Knorr and those little cubes have. So it actually tastes quite good, and it just gives it a very nice hit of flavor. You don't need to measure it. I'm going to do this only because I just need can I have one of those spoons actually behind me? It's more a question of just mixing it into something. I usually just put it into like a little cup at home to dissolve it. So because we've got the, oh, that was pepper in it. I just saw some black spots. What are those? I had the pepper mill in there. So it's, because the sausage is going to give this a lot of flavor, we could even just use water, okay? So I'm just going to put a little bit of stock, and then what I'm going to do is just really float the vegetables. So I'll show you what that looks like. And because the water was boiling, it's already, so really you're just floating them, because we can add more water if we need it afterwards. For now, we just want to float them so that the vegetables have enough liquid to cook. So there we go. I'm going to add just a pinch of salt. Probably doesn't need much because of the stock, and again the sausage will have a lot of flavor. And some pepper. So we're going to let that simmer, and then the only thing we need to add to that later is we're going to add some leafy greens. Again, it's optional. and we're gonna add some, and I'm gonna get, that's my handler store. I'm gonna get you guys to open cans. We'll open those, we're gonna rinse them. Remember, whenever you use canned beans, they're a great shortcut, but rinse them. Drain them and rinse them because the water that they're in is very starchy and salty. What we want on this is just a simmer, right? So that you can see it boiling, but not a rumbling. You don't need a rumbling boil, okay? And once those vegetables are tender, we can add the greens and the beans. Oh, you know what I didn't add? I sort of what we could do, but let's have this one without, because one of the soups is going to be tomatoey, so let's have this one not tomatoey. But if you wanted to make this soup tomatoey, we would have added the tomatoes after the with the vegetables. So once before adding the water, we would put in the tomatoes and let those cook a little bit to get rid of that raw flavor that the canned tomatoes have. So you can make this tomatoey easily, and you would put it in, and now it's just going to simmer. The other thing I forgot, but we can put that in now, is let's just put in a little bit of garlic because it's kind of nice in this. And that could have gone in, that probably should have sauteed with the onions, but you'll see that doesn't really, there are no hard and fast rules to this. Okay. Good. So that one's done, essentially.